Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. The High Ground. Yes, I have it. Don't try it, Anakin. The High Ground here on It's All Been Trekked Before. You can take the high ground on your friends. Go support us at patreon.com/IABD. Support the network. Support this show. And you will have the high ground with us and with It's All Been Trekked fans and your friends and really most of planet Earth. The high ground here on It's All Been Trekked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Your regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. And we are here today to talk about the seminal episode of The Next Generation, The High Ground.
Have the high ground. This is another, like last week, kind of a, for lack of a better term, rip from the headlines kind of episode, but not in an all bad way. But I also feel this one's another okay episode. It's another one that kind of telegraphs early on, like, this is what this episode's going to be about. I think it has some interesting exchanges in it. I think it has interesting analogies and parallels to our modern world, whether you're talking 2020 or when this came out in 1990. But I don't know that I loved it by any means.
Similar. My first note was that Marianne will regret missing this show based upon the title alone because of the references to I have the high ground. Yeah.
Don't try it, Anakin.
Yeah, that was completely the wrong voice I was doing just then. Anyway, apart from that, this also did feel politically topical for this year, being 2020. And
this episode will be out in 2021.
Anyway, this relates more to the protests from 2020.
Oh, yeah, I remember. That was like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, sort of. It just, yeah, the idea of referring to, well, to be fair, I think a lot more had transpired within the world of this episode than had here. But it felt like the early stages of categorizing the people who were unhappy with the way things were going as terrorists. But there was something that the soldier was saying, or the police officer, whoever in this episode, the woman who was the representative.
Yeah. Alexana.
Yeah, she was saying something to the effect that there were mistreatment of a certain group of people. It sounded very much like the police type brutality, things of that nature. And then,
but she made it better.
Well, she characterized it as things were better and worse or whatever, but then these people just kept going because they just wanted an excuse to riot sometimes or have violence. And
but she talked about her predecessor would lock people up without a trial or anything.
Yeah, there we go. Yep.
Yeah, and she's not doing that. So Alexana, who we have to assume is the great granddaughter of Betsy DeVos, Alexana DeVos.
That was her name?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Alexana DeVos was the character's name, yes.
Wow.
Huh.
No relation to Betsy, obviously, because she actually was compassionate and cared about people. So
we're just, oh, man.
Yeah, I agree with you. I thought this was a fine episode, maybe slightly worse than last week. But I did appreciate that we finally had a Dr. Crusher plot, because those don't come around all that often.
Yeah, I
wrote Dr. Crusher get screen time.
My last note of the episode was, you know what? I'm cool with Crusher episodes. Even if I didn't love this episode, it wasn't her fault.
Yes. I found it frustrating.
That's a good word for a lot of the episode.
Especially at the beginning. And, I guess we did get a Crusher episode out of it eventually, but her role in the beginning was very frustrating to me. Just that whole, how did I put it? I said, I respected the principle of what she was trying to do when she was helping the injured people. But part of me was actually kind of glad that something bad happened to her, like immediately as a result of her trying to do that. Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was so obvious that, like, hey guys, something bad's going to happen to her. I mean, and how could she not sense that? I mean, what kind of bedside manner is that? But you're right. If Spock had been there, he'd be like, no, this isn't a conversation. And as entertaining,
Fincher and carry her back.
Yeah, exactly. As much as I enjoyed, the line, like, I don't want to be in the transporter room to greet her if we beam her up. As entertaining as that is, I feel like people didn't do the job at the beginning of the episode across the board.
Yeah, they should have just beamed her straight back at that point and just take the people with. Why is this so much different than beaming somebody to sick bay?
Right, and I feel like you can't go back and get those people. I mean, fight today and another day. And I get the Hippocratic Oath and all that, but
I mean, even right then, when she was bent over, they could have beamed them both, like all the injured people, to sit there
agree
with her.
I wonder why they didn't do that as well, other than maybe they're locals and they didn't have their permission and they didn't want to like kidnap a local.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think if Picard and Beverly didn't have the relationship that they have, Picard would have not hesitated? Like, absolutely. I kind of feel like his personal feelings towards her led to her this situation that allowed her to be kidnapped.
I think this was like first season.
He would have beamed him right up.
Yeah. Crusher had such a kind of ridiculous line in there of something about I'm trying to put life back in a wounded body with sleight of hand.
Yes.
It just felt very McCoy and not really Crusher there.
Crusher, yeah.
I mean, I have a couple notes before that, actually, setting up that scene. They kept the episode started with a voiceover of Picard telling us how dangerous this place was, and the music was backing him up. But at the same time, we're seeing people happy and laughing and calm going about their day. And so it was very much a tell, don't show instead of show, don't tell. Like, nobody seems scared or concerned.
Well,
except for Picard and the music.
And I know the analogy Keith made earlier about, socially about this episode. In my mind, I went straight to the Mideast and like Tel Aviv and people being in cafes and bombs exploding. And, now obviously terrorism's everywhere one way or another. And actually, to your point, Keith, that kind of terrorism has been going on and is going on. And I think that's why they established it like, oh, this is a peaceful place where people are okay. It's seemingly okay. But even though he said, well, this is danger. And then again, that just adds to we know something bad is going to happen to Crusher. It's just, it's not if, it's when, and it does.
I was telegraphed so heavily. Yeah. I mean, when she tried to run to help the people in the guard, like tried to stop her, and she was basically like, you can't go in there. And she's like, I'm a doctor, and just pushes past him. And he didn't try to stop her at all. Yeah. Like the guards were just, whoa. I thought it was terrifying that they were all out in public without masks close together.
Of course.
We haven't gotten there yet.
By now, this virus is gone, right?
God.
Spoiler, I don't think the virus is gone by the time this airs. But then they're like, well, it's dangerous. There could be another bomb. And then a minute later, after they've had a chance to scan, they're like, there's no more bombs. I'm like, why did you scan in the first place? Why are you panicking about something that's no one there? And then when the kidnapper shows up, I mean, I get, like, it was very obvious that was his intended target was Crusher. This was a trap for Crusher, blah, blah, blah. But nobody tries to shoot the kidnapper. There is plenty of time for a guard or Worf or Data to stun this kidnapper, and nobody moves. They just stand there and stare as he kidnaps Crusher.
A lot of people not doing their jobs at the opening of this episode. I'm going to say it, false construct, but I guess it's not a false construct if people don't do their jobs for a variety of reasons. They just weren't prepared. That's clear.
I mean, Worf and Data were there. You can't tell me they weren't prepared.
Well, and I wrote at the very beginning, Picard's thing is like, well, we're on another medical supply mission. I'm like, man, another medical supply mission. So there is also that idea of like, well, I take that back. I was going to say, well, we do these all the time and nothing happens, except every episode that starts with a medical supply mission ends up in a bad place. So they should have been prepared.
After the kidnapping, we go up to them telling Wesley about his mother's kidnapping, and talk about a staged scene. Like, he and Crusher are sitting knee to knee, and then it feels like somebody said action and she starts talking. Like, you'd think as he's coming in, there's already questions and stuff, but instead, like, we have to stage the scene perfectly. And it was a very exposition-y scene about everything we knew about her kidnappers. It just, man, it was pretty ridiculous.
They're already selling me on this one being lower, I guess, this episode.
After that, we get Alexandra's story to Riker, and she's talking about the terrorism and, they killed a whole bus of children and all this stuff. And it was so over the top. Like,
I wrote down, it reminded me of a line from the Brady Bunch movie that Michael McKean delivers because he says they exploded a bus with 60 school children. And it reminded in the Brady Bunch movie, Michael McKean's trying to get these guys not to use Mike Brady as their architect. And he's like, oh, it's a shame what happened with this last project. Killed a whole bunch of orphans, some of them with puppies. And I was waiting for her to say some of these kids on the bus had puppies in their laps when they blew it up. Because I was like, come on.
It was just so ridiculous. Like there are so many ways that would seem more realistic.
Yeah.
Even the later backtracking of, well, they said they didn't mean to kill children. It was supposed to be cops. Yeah, but you said you sent a kid to plant the bomb.
Right.
It doesn't.
Well, and there was obviously there was then the end scene, the kids about to shoot somebody. So there is that whole starts when they're young, or it never ends. Actually, is what I'm saying.
Right.
But yeah, that's another one of those where it's like there's a less heavy-handed way to say that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of heavy-handedness in the episode. Like I said, I do like some exchanges. We'll get to them, but there's a lot of real heavy-handed.
Keith, did you catch what they were using to transport themselves?
Like physically, not really. I mean, I know the explanations came up.
They said it was a dimensional shifter.
Yes, yes.
You can only use dimensional shifters if you're immortal, like Packer and Ratcliffe.
Oh, okay. That's the reference. I wasn't sure if you were going for like Rick and Morty or something, or
didn't they call it the inverter? Isn't that what they called it?
Oh, I thought they said shift. I don't know. They called it.
I know they said
they said shifting dimensions. I think.
Right. They did say that. Did they explain how they got it?
Nope.
Okay.
That seems real. I was going to say it seems really advanced technology, but they did talk about. I think it was Jordy in a scene was like, "Yeah, we know about that technology. We don't use it because it kills people. It's awful."
Right.
They said that there was they were in contact with either some alien species who was dealing with them, or some sympathetic scientist or something that gave them this technology and explained the dangers. It seemed like it was maybe one. We've had those kinds of characters in the past, like one scientist who was on the brink of advancing something and experimental technology did something. I think the idea was wherever they got it from, it was probably one of the best possible versions of it at the time, but it was still dangerous, was the point of it.
Backing up a little bit, I love the early on Crusher vow of silence, where she just wasn't going to talk. It was just, I guess maybe I just like, clearly I like looking at Gates McFadden, but I just liked her. I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to look at you. But
I was really hoping you weren't going that direction with it, but what?
Well, I didn't feel like there was a good reason for her to shift to talking.
And while we're speaking of lines like there were 60 school children, she says to him, "I have a son." And I wrote down, "What kind of crazy dating site is this?" Where that's yeah, she opens with, "I have a son. I'm 33."
Yeah. Onlymothers.com.
I never bought the romance they hinted between the two of them. I don't think Crusher would have gone for that, regardless of.
I have more on this later, but it felt like it was going to go a creepy Stockholm syndrome way.
Yeah,
and it ended up going with she felt sympathy for his cause, but the rest of it, it was like.
Picard called her out on it. And so Finn was played by Richard Cox, who's best known for Cruising with Al Pacino, been Alpha House. This was his only Star Trek credit. So. And this is what he's fourth best known for on IMDb.
Wow.
There was a line that Crusher had with him where she's like, "You should be drawing, not killing." And he was like, "Can I do both?" And I was like, okay. That lost me right there.
It'd been better.
That wasn't exactly what she said, but I mean, it's the gist of it. It was, the "can I do both" thing. The Stockholm Syndrome thing.
Great song.
It was, I think that was a little reductionist and kind of insulting toward her, and I think it was sort of meant to be in the moment. And the idea of her being able to live among the captors and see what they were going through was important. However heavy-handed or however poorly executed, it was still something that's important usually in those situations. The message that there's always other sides of the stories. People needed to be able to really live and experience it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Maybe, I was leaning that way because I'm just so used to that trope. Then, especially, I don't know if as much now, but the Stockholm.
I think that if anything, it was sort of odd and sort of out of character for Picard to be there and say things in the way that he was saying them, and even that kind of opportunism, I guess, was the idea of, oh, he's got a crush on you, let's use that. Kind of something about it just came off a little strange, and this is that is, I will agree to the episode's detriment. just something felt a little off for those things.
That's fair.
You talked about her getting creepy with Finn when she says, "I'll do anything you ask." That's where I thought it was going to get real creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Crusher looked very happy to see Picard when Picard gets kidnapped, which that's the romance I wanted.
Right.
Speaking of which, one of my later notes in retrospect was I appreciated the storyline with Riker and the
Miss DeVos.
DeVos, yes.
Yeah.
Alexandra.
There's something about the way that came off that was refreshingly professional, I will say.
Yeah.
I mean, she's an attractive woman. It wasn't about him like holding back some sort of romantic tension. It wasn't the conflict. It wasn't anything like that. It was just them dealing with business and kind of not quite agreeing. And that was it.
And again, that was my expectation, is that was where we were going. And then I wrote down, when Riker takes charge, I wrote, he clearly is not interested in this woman, because he's like, I'm taking over this investigation or whatever he says there.
I thought there was definite chemistry between them, but I was glad they didn't pursue it.
Yeah.
Because we've seen that on how many other episodes.
Yeah.
Oh, this is my one fashion note. Maybe it's because she was that Larry King look she was sporting with the suspenders and the blue shirt early on.
I didn't catch that.
It's like she took her jacket off and she's got suspenders and a blue shirt on. And I'm like, what is this Larry King thing she's doing here? I think that might have been the thing that turned
Larry King is still sexy in the 24th century.
That's right.
And
anyway,
alive.
sorry, Jimmy, you're going somewhere else.
No, I was just going to say, when I saw her, I thought she was played by Kelly Williams from The Practice. But clearly she was not. When you
she
look
looked
her
very
up.
familiar, but yeah,
she was played by
like
Carrie Keene. She was best known for Hitting Home, Distant Thunder, The Incubus. She got 76 credits. I was looking through them. I don't recognize her. I think I just thought she looked familiar because she looked like somebody else.
My point is that it's more realistic in the sense of, yes, you can have an attractive man and an attractive woman working together in a situation like that. There's a brief, the chemistry you probably thought you saw was a brief, like, yeah, okay. But the episode had nothing to do with that. It was not driven by that at all. And I appreciated that.
The boy that Steven mentioned was played by Christopher Petitiot.
Yeah.
Best known for Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
All I remember is The Dishes Are Done, man. That's pretty much it.
It doesn't look, he died in 2000 at the age of 24.
Drug overdose. Really sad story.
So he didn't live too long. He partied hard, I guess. And
yeah, he OD'd. That's how he passed. Yeah, he'd kind of fallen into poverty, and yeah.
This was his very first credit. He ended up with 27 of them. He did Dookie Howser later this year, but yeah.
Okay, so the actress I was thinking was Dina Meyer.
And
notably like Starship Troopers and so forth. Yeah.
So we think Carrie Keene looks like multiple other actresses.
Yes.
I liked the future. We got a little future history.
Yeah.
Between Riker and her. They mentioned the Irish reunification of 2024.
Oh, I just listened to the first part of that. Okay.
Which I assume with Brexit and everything and Ireland not wanting to Brexit, maybe that one Star Trek might get it right.
I think with Crusher and the Captor, him going back to something very convenient, George Washington and America and so forth. That's a popular comparison, I guess, for what we consider to be terrorism.
It just made me think of Hamilton.
Yes, that exactly. And it's just heavy-handed again is the term would use for bringing it back to something relatable to Americans.
I liked, I always like when I wrote down Crusher got served, because I like it when people are like, I don't like it as much like when Q does it, but like when a lot of the people are like, oh, so you're from Earth and you got over violence. So you're like a recovering alcoholic. You used to drink all the time, but now you don't. So you're going to tell me how to do it.
Oh, no,
you can do this all the time. But
thank you for bringing that up. That is that was like the one of the most redeeming aspects of that conversation. I thought the idea of you are now nice and comfortable in this environment, and so you feel you're taking the high ground, although he didn't say it.
Yeah,
because you have the luxury of doing that. So he was checking your privilege essentially.
Yeah, I think that's the high point of the episode, quite possibly. And of all their exchanges, I thought that was the most like, okay, you're starting to win me over. And I think that's where he actually starts to win her over. So I wrote, Crusher got served. on history and, well, actually food too. So,
and sociology and so on. It's just it's easy to denounce violence, the methods of getting to social change and
right. And I think the tricky part, I guess I commend the episode for this too, is what he's saying there isn't wrong and all that kind of stuff. But do we really feel like he's the good guy? Who's to say who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and all that kind of stuff? I think again, that's why it reminds me of the Middle East and that kind of thing. It's like, well, are they all good? Well, they did this and that kind of stuff. And you could point to a number of conflicts and probably a number of them that we've already done on Next Generation too. But so I commend it for that in being that, yeah, this guy makes sense, but I'm still not sure I support his thinking. I don't know that I support his cause.
But, that's good though. I think that is the point of having an episode like this if you're going to do it. And there's a couple of things there. So one, it speaks again to the heavy-handedness of what you were saying before about the bus of 60 children.
Some with puppies.
That was maybe a bridge too far, but I think they were trying hard to keep it from being from anyone being obviously sympathetic. And I think after the year we've had, especially, that made it hard for me to get behind what DeVos was saying. From where she was coming, I was already automatically kind of I mean, I wonder if I would have felt the same, 20 years ago, seeing this argument come up. But
there's a definite change in the way I think about cops after this year.
I still want to believe in the idea of protecting and serving, keeping people safe, especially in the situations like that. There are a lot of people who don't deserve to be victimized by the conflict that arises from whatever's going on. They don't deserve to be collateral damage. But at the same time, there's that simplistic way of looking at things, and I think that was what the problem I would have had with the 60 children and puppies argument. Was it made it too easy for her to say, look at what they did there. But at the same time, it also makes it suitably difficult for us to just go, oh, whoa, these poor people, these poor would-be terrorists. So I don't know.
So my next notes are involving the attack on the Enterprise when the terrorists dimensional shifted up there, which I guess shields probably don't block dimensional shifters. That's why they try to raise them.
I guess not.
But they stopped the bomb pretty quickly, and they threw it out in space, which I thought the visual effect of that bomb exploding was way too big for the little tiny bomb by scale of the Enterprise. Like they beamed the bomb and you could see it next to the Enterprise, and that was like, really? Because it was really tiny and the Enterprise is big. But I did enjoy that Picard got some slugs in on that fight.
Yeah.
What I did really disappointed me was how easily the terrorists gave up. Like, oh, our bomb didn't go off, so we kidnapped the captain. Okay, so wait, your bomb didn't go off, so why don't you just beam back and put another bomb? Because you're clearly still attacking, or don't leave the bomb until you've only got 3 seconds left instead of giving them plenty of time to disarm it and throw it out. It just felt like you infiltrated that easy. You should try again.
Well, wait, the captor made it sound as if that was the intent. Like it was a ruse. Like he said, we didn't destroy the ship. As if the whole point was to kidnap Picard.
I thought they came across as he was a consolation prize because the ship wasn't destroyed.
Maybe, but that might have been just he made it seem like that was part of the plan.
Yeah,
it's during that conversation.
Yeah, I didn't get that. I thought that this was their backup plan was to get Picard. Although that does lead into maybe my favorite exchange in the episode when Picard is talking to Crusher and he's like, you don't follow orders. And she said, if you give reasonable orders, I'd obey. I feel like only she could get away with saying that to him. And that's part of why I like their dynamic is everybody else is so in awe and respectful of Picard. And she's just like, shut up, bitch.
That was part of the thing that was really irritating me at the beginning, though. The whole idea of that standard of just, no, all right. You made a good point, though, at the time. If it had been season 1 or if they hadn't had the relationship, maybe he would have been more willing to just yank her off the planet. But that felt like an example of people not doing their job, as Stephen was saying. It just, it was just way too lax under the circumstances.
See, I think I read more into their relationship than the show has given us. Like, I really think if this was a show made today, we would have seen over the last 10 episodes how glad he was that she was back after that year away, and how he was deferring to her more and creating a dangerous situation where she wasn't following his orders and he was putting her at risk because of his feelings. But
No,
they
that's
don't.
good.
Well,
That's
I'm assuming all of that, and that's why I like it. That's not actually there on screen.
Okay. No, that's something that that probably should have been written in to some extent, but that is very much that's more of an Orville kind of thing, or more of a modern
It's just
kind
modern
of
storytelling. They didn't do serial back then.
Yeah. I mean, even if it had been spread out over a few episodes, if they'd kind of
see, I mean, Deep Space Nine was after this, and that was ahead of its time doing serial storytelling. Although people do argue Next Gen does a 3-episode serial story coming up here. Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2, and then the episode after that, Family. The 3 episodes are kind of a serial story. But we're not there yet, and I wouldn't say Next Gen does that a bunch after that either. It's still in this era where you just don't tell those serial stories. So
it's very much a syndication, catch up with what we tell you. And
I mean, I've read recently how hard the producers had to fight to get that one episode after the 2-part Best of Both Worlds, that family episode, where they're like, they just went through this huge traumatic 2-parter. We can't just have things that's normal next week. We need an episode to decompress and show something before we go back to normal. And the network did not want to let them do that. They had to fight really, really hard.
By this point, they should have been to a point where they were like, we know people are going to rewatch these because that's what they do with Star Trek. But maybe it was like, oh, we've taken on so many more viewers now that we don't want to lose them, maybe. But still.
Well, I think they didn't think they'd watch them in order.
Right.
Because you could still get VHS, but they were hard to get. It wasn't, DVDs weren't here yet.
This relates to a couple of my notes, actually, but I will say yes, not even DVDs, but I mean, DVRs weren't a thing. I mean, you still had to record things with your VCR, whether or not you were even doing that. These 2 episodes, I'm fairly certain this one and the last one, I'm fairly certain I've never seen before.
I don't know that I have either.
And
they didn't seem familiar.
I know I've seen episodes after this that are coming up, and I don't know. Maybe I was in college at the time, or the timing of. I just don't remember exactly what was going on or why I would have missed episodes. But it feels like, perhaps they weren't as confident about these as Jimmy was saying. That they weren't that great, and so they don't replay the ones who are like as often as they do the other ones. And it's just a testament.
Yeah, they play the Best of Both Worlds over and over and over again.
Did they?
Oh yeah, Best of Both Worlds reran constantly.
So yeah, I don't remember exactly, and it's so hard to remember exactly how things were going on back then. Everything's just sort of a blur. What season was it? Where are you in the season? Are you watching week to week? Is it new?
Well, and again, I think the fanatics, for lack of a better term, were probably watching the reruns every week too and knew what was coming up. But those casual fans, like you said, they might have just dropped in like, oh, I don't remember where are we here?
And Next Gen was super popular.
Yeah.
And you don't want to mess with a formula for a show that's super popular.
Right.
Yeah. And, it's that thing of like, I was Mr. Nostalgia with TOS, obviously, but there's so many people that, friends of mine now that, when I post about the show, whether on wherever on social media, are like, oh, that's awesome. You guys are up to TNG. And I'm like, oh, you're not a lot younger than me. You're younger enough than me that's where you came in. That's your Star Trek entry point. And me and Kirk are chuckleheads that you guys don't give a crap about. But which again, it's great. I think it's as an entry point, it's a good one. But yeah,
I'll probably cut this, but they released a brand new original series novel today, set during the 5-year mission.
Oh wow!
With Kirk, Spock, McCoy, like the old 60s looking picture on the front. I came in the mail today. Huh. I'll probably read that next after I finish the autobiography of Catherine Janeway.
Interesting.
Well, we should talk about. I mean, I think this is a good thing that we haven't really gone into. I don't know if I would consider myself casual. Well, probably not anymore, or even back then. It's like I remember being too young at the time that well, obviously when I was born, I think the series had already stopped airing, like first run, obviously TOS. It was already in syndication. Mm-hmm. I remember being able to see little bits of it when I was like a toddler, essentially with my dad watching it on, the kind of color TV with the knobs and everything. Mm-hmm. and just none of it really ever sank in until TNG came on. And by then I was old enough to pay attention and didn't care about it. But even then, I don't know if it's because I didn't have the means or I wasn't a fanatic yet or whatever. Just really, I wasn't able to follow it week to week.
I was obsessed with Star Trek in this era, and I still don't watch it week to week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, okay, that's worth exploring, I think. Like, why didn't you?
I was a kid. I didn't have the autonomy to I mean, we had T-ball in the evenings and things, you're never home the same day every week, and trying to set the VCR was a huge pain in the butt at that point. And not something I did regularly as a kid. So I'd read every book I could get my hands on and play with the action figures, but there were plenty of episodes I didn't see. I didn't see DS9 all the way through till I was in college and the DVDs came out and I got the DVDs. I mean, I watched a lot of DS9 when it was on the air. What I would do is I would subscribe to the Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager magazines they'd put out like 4 times a year. And in those magazines, they had full color photos and breaking down every episode that had aired since the last issue came out. So there were those, the Next Gen and original series. I bought episode guides where you got to read through everything about the episode. So that's how I consumed a lot of the episodes, was not watching them, but reading about them.
Interesting.
Because that's what was available to me. That's what I could get my hands on.
And I know I've talked about it before that, when Next Gen came around, I was still into Star Trek, but, I was 18 or I was 19 when Next Gen, I was in college and I had a girlfriend and it was on Saturday nights. So I might see the beginning of the episode because they would show it twice. I think I would see it on like a station like Cleveland, WUAB. And then they would show it again at 11. I was more likely to catch part of it at 11 than I was at 7. But even then, I think I saw more of this when my sister and my mom would have it on than I saw it like, oh, that's on. I was just never appointment viewing for me because I had a girlfriend. I was like, I have a girlfriend finally, and I can go to a movie or do something else.
Interesting.
I remember when Enterprise came out, I was in college, and I was like, oh, finally a Star Trek show I'm going to sit and watch every week. But then I didn't because I was in college and I was working full time and I had friends, and I VHS taped a lot of the episodes, but by mid-season 1, I'm like, this is getting too cumbersome to try to VHS tape this from my dorm room. So I stopped until the final season. And then I did record the final season on VHS tapes and watch them.
That's, I think it was by the time Voyager came out even. That's when I think a little bit more, I was more intent on trying to watch it week to week. And even then it was still just, I would see reruns so often, I'd still watch them. But there were certain episodes you would see over and over again. And not necessarily some of the more obscure ones in the middle. I don't know. Just, and God, I wasn't from a household where TV was like a big thing. It was just like we had, TVs in multiple rooms, at least 1 or 2 VCRs. Maybe only one could record. I'm not sure. But I was the one who would be able to figure out how to do things like that. Essentially, by the time I got out of there, certainly there was pre-DVR, there was a window of time. Like, this is like me in my 20s, and I could even set up things like multiple VCRs, multiple rooms to be able to have to stagger things to.
I remember right before DVRs took off, not only was I recording Enterprise weekly on VHS, my friends were recording Lost on VHS, and I'd missed the first half season of Lost, so they let me borrow their VHS tapes of Lost. And I was watching 24 on VHS, and that was all right before I feel like the early 2000s, DVDs were out, but people in my generation were finally like recording shows weekly on VCR the way other people had done in the 80s and 90s.
What I had to do watching the original series in the 70s in syndication was memorize the TV guide. So that was that was the only thing I could do. But I did have me and my brother had our own TV in our room. And so again, it was the same channel, WAB out of Cleveland, showed Star Trek every night at 9:00, and I watched it every night at 9:00.
And when your father was young, he had to wait for Shatner, Nimoy, and DeForest to come to town in their traveling performance.
That's right. That's right.
I used to rely on the Sunday Columbus Dispatches with the little TV things.
Yes, I used to.
Just go in
Yeah.
I used to as well.
Wow.
Well, I'll probably actually leave that in because it was an interesting discussion on our background. But let's jump back into this episode.
Sure.
But before we do that, I just had to address the
Sure.
the Patreon audience that they got to see me do a spit take there because when I was drinking went down with the wrong pipe, and I was just like, it wasn't surprise. It was just complete, like, I could feel it happen. I was like, hey, I'm swallowing this wrong. Too late. So yeah, sorry. Moving on.
So after they kidnap Picard, they come back to talk to Troy and basically give her their demands. On the bridge, Wesley had been like, one more time they do it, I'm going to be able to trace them. So then we get, after that confrontation with Troy, we go to the bridge, and Wesley's like, I got him, and they're all looking over his shoulder as they trace, but there's no mention on what that last trace was. Like, nobody's concerned that another terrorist beam somewhere. Like, they're not worried about Troy. They're not worried about an infiltration. It felt very false.
On the subject of that technology being used, during that first scene where Crusher was telling the captor essentially how dangerous the technology was that he was using, or rather, she was examining the people. This is what's been going on. I was almost a little surprised there wasn't some reaction from her that you just used this on me to get me here.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she would at least express some alarm at that, but
it sounded like once or twice wasn't really hurting them. It was the repeated use.
Eventually, that did come up, but even
you've made me smoke a couple of cigarettes, but I'm okay.
Like when Picard was talking about it, that seemed really weird. That something about the conversation felt like off, maybe out of character. Something when he was saying we need to escape any way possible, and she's like, suddenly she's so concerned about the danger of using it one more time.
Yeah.
So
the Enterprise finds the terrorists and they beam in. They were sneaking up behind the first couple of people, and I kept thinking, man, they need Spock to do the neck pinch right now. And then they pulled out these little things that they jabbed in their neck, and I was like, oh, did they come up with an electronic Vulcan neck pinch? I loved it.
Yeah.
You would think they would by now.
What I disliked about that scene is we got Beverly telling Picard, there's some things I want to tell you if we don't get out of here. And then we never got to hear those things.
I wrote down when we hit that was reminding me of the Seinfeld finale where George reveals he cheated in the contest, and there's a couple other things. And then Jerry's about to reveal his thing. I think it's Jerry or Elaine, one of them. And then, the plane levels out and they're not going to crash. And it's never said. And also, for the other part of the Star Wars episode, a part of this podcast, episode 9 also has a scene where it's like, I never told you. And then they escape and they never say what they were going to tell them.
I much prefer Almost Famous. I don't
remember that.
Where they think the plane's going down. They all get their confessions out before the plane.
I do too. I mean, it's like an improv or anything else where people get drunk or stoned or you're on the verge of death. You make big confessions. It was a big tease. This goes back to my complaint that they never went there with Beverly and Picard.
Yeah. I mean, in the series finale of Next Gen is the closest they get, but they never go there with them. Even in Star Trek Picard now, I'm itching so deeply for them to go there with them in Star Trek Picard, and they haven't yet. I mean, she wasn't in the first season, so.
Yeah.
So they've stormed the terrorist base, and then DeVos has Finn in her sights, but she waits to shoot him. She hesitates, which I thought was kind of odd.
Well, Jimmy, one dead martyr equals 10 posturing leaders. So she knew the math.
So that was, I must have been looking away then. I heard her explanation afterwards. So if that's the same scene, then I guess the point was that she was actually considering why she was doing it.
Another reason might have been, and I knew we'd get there with Finn. He says, I had a son too. I was like, I knew we'd get here. I knew we'd get to where he said I had a son. And sure enough, we got there. And that was another, speaking of heavy-handed and predictable, was like, we know you had we knew he had a son.
So then everything's all happy in the end, and Beverly's loving on her son on the bridge. And the Picard, I will say, I liked the exit line of this episode of take us out of orbit, Mr. Crusher, at your convenience.
Yeah, I did enjoy that.
Because it's from his mother. Yeah.
Last note I had was actually for, I think, the fashion beat. And it's not necessarily accurate. And it's just an impression I had. It seemed like the rebels were wearing like Khan type outfits or from his colony.
They may have very well reused costumes.
Yeah. They didn't say the high ground, but they did say Errand of Mercy, referencing a series episode, a very good one. They bring up the Elway theorem And I couldn't find anything to support this, but this was around the time, this is the sports part of the podcast, the Broncos went to the Super Bowl a couple years back to back, including they were about to go to the Super Bowl weeks after this episode and get completely destroyed. So but I couldn't find anything saying John Elway was the quarterback of the Broncos. That's they went to the Super Bowl. He got referenced a lot in South Park later.
I kind of knew that. Maybe South Park is the reason why. I don't know, but
he did eventually win 2 Super Bowls. But around this time, he was making Super Bowls and he was getting his butt kicked every time.
So you think that it might be a reference to him in some way?
I feel like it is. I feel like that was the name they went to.
I love stuff like that, though. Of course, we all like the future history thing, or the idea of there being these precedented scientists or something to add to the canon of it. But I don't know if it's stuck anywhere.
He developed a theory on interdimensional travel, so that fits into my analogy perfectly. That the more you travel, the more it hurts. The more he went to the Super Bowl, the worse he got beat. But eventually, he did win. But so we have another saucer separation with almost. Sorry. We talk about saucer separation.
Sure.
I got a little excited there.
I don't think they really had time for it, but it made sense.
They didn't. So I didn't think it was going to happen, but just to reference back to for whatever reason, I actually felt more fear, and maybe this goes to the whole terrorism idea of the episode. Those guys coming up and just shooting people left and right scared me more than a lot of the other threats we've had in other episodes, where the threat to the ship was, we're going to blow up the whole ship and all that stuff. For whatever reason, and maybe that's that whole thing of, on an individual level, terrorism is a lot scarier than if you think about it on a big global level, maybe.
Well, I think it's also plot armor. I mean,
sure.
you realize that you can't you can't blow up the whole ship.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
Not in this episode, anyway.
No.
Not a season finale.
At some point, I think it's Crusher says to Finn, like, "Oh, you don't want the Enterprise coming here, blah blah blah," and Finn's like. And this is a line that was used in Batman Forever. On the contrary, I'm counting on it. I don't know if you guys remember Jim Carrey as the Riddler. The similar line is delivered like, "Oh, Batman's going to come and get you." Worried, I'm counting on it. Finally, we kept calling it Stockholm Syndrome, but it was really Space Stockholm Syndrome.
Space Stockholm, I like it.
We talked about that Irish rebellion of 2024, or whatever they said.
Yes.
So initially, this was not shown in the United Kingdom or Ireland because of that.
Just because of that one line?
Yeah, they did not show it.
Saying the Irish reunification?
Yeah. So eventually, by the mid-aughts, they both started showing
That's it. That's dumb.
Yeah.
See, this is.
But also, they were probably like, "Oh my God, there's an episode we have to see it," and they say it like, "Oh."
And I can see them thinking, I saw Middle East, and Keith saw the more recent social things, and they saw, "Oh, this is about us. This is definitely Northern Ireland and England. That's what this is about."
It probably would have been more likely back then as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that they say, "Oh, they reunify," may have been an allusion to whoever the Rudians will reunify. But
the idea of syndication again, they could do things like that. They just discard episodes, whatever.
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
Yep.
These fans aren't paying attention anyway. We're just gonna
right.
I mean, they're still discarding episodes now. If somebody wore blackface or something in a sitcom episode.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
True.
I do want to call out that this episode was written by Melinda Snodgrass. She had served as story editor for most of last season. She wrote 5 episodes herself. So her first one was Measure of a Man, the Data trial for his humanity.
Oh, yeah.
And this was her last one. Oh, wow. So what came in strong, went out kind of weak sauce, unfortunately. She also wrote Pen Pals, Data with the little girl.
Oh, yeah.
Up the Long Ladder with our favorite Brenna.
Mm-hmm.
And Ensigns of Command earlier this season. Another Data
the cat.
Episode.
Oh my God.
Callie's back.
Sorry.
It was directed by a woman as well. This was written and directed by a woman. Directed by Gabrielle Beaumont, which I have to think for the 80s, that was probably a big deal. It was written and directed by a woman. She's best known for being a director on Remington Steele, Hill Street Blues, LA Law, and of course Star Trek. She'll do an episode of Voyager. She'll do an episode of Deep Space Nine, and she directs 7 episodes of Next Gen. This is actually her second episode directing Next Gen. So she'll do about 1 a year for the rest of the series.
Cool.
Alternate episodes.
So I had originally written Space Stockholm Syndrome for this, and then I realized that's not really an alternate episode. That's what happened. Kinda, not really.
Sure.
Mine's very dark. Mine takes the Picard idea a little further, but without Picard suggesting it. It's that Crusher does seduce Finn, and then she kills him and escapes.
I just remembered I did not give an alternate episode last week, but I'm going to say it's the same alternate episode for both episodes. Mm-hmm. Both times we have Jane Fonda protesting the war. That's my alternate episode. Okay. Just because I love Jane Fonda and I want to see her in Star Trek. I don't think she's ever been in Star Trek. I have to look it up, but I don't think
Barbarella is as close as we get.
Maybe she was too big for Star Trek because back in those days, movie stars didn't do television.
Yeah.
But I feel like she fits the Star Trek ethos.
Yes.
And should have definitely done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just Googled. I don't see any Star Trek credits for her. Anyway, our annoyance factor. How annoying was Wesley? Scale of 1 to 10.
I liked him this episode. I give him a 1 again.
1, yeah. I mean, serve the purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I had several complaints that were scenes involving him, but never was it him that was the problem. So, I mean, the staged telling him his mother's been kidnapped and then him like figuring out how to track them, but nobody questions how he got that last track. You know, who was your annoyance in this episode?
Mine was Oksana, the security woman. Yeah. I wanted to like her more, but it could have been Finn too, but I thought he spoke more truth that I agreed with, I guess.
I see your reasoning, but I'm going to go with Finn.
Yeah, I could see that.
That is tough. I mean, I was kind of in both camps here. I'm going to have to go with Beverly for that opening.
Oh,
mostly. Yeah. The idea of her.
I think it was everybody that was
to begin with.
No, it was everybody that was supposed to be protecting her that was bad. It wasn't her. Crush of Star Trek, and I'm sorry you cannot choose Beverly because I'm pretty sure we all would if we could.
I'm staying pat.
You're staying Leah Brahms. You're not going to go to Alexandra DeVos?
Nah, I thought about it, but nah.
I'm going to go with her.
Yeah.
Keith?
Same kind of thing. I was like, wanted to like her, and then it just, the character, man, just the what she represents. So,
yeah, I mean, where I decided to go with her is I do think she was doing her best in a bad situation, and she at least seemed to not take those radical steps. She was trying to make the cops more well respected and obeying things instead of authoritarian. So
yeah, I guess I'm just not there yet.
Okay. Let's rank this episode. I said last week I think this was a little bit worse than last week, but now that I've had time to talk through them both, I kind of think this was a little better. Let's start with last week. Better or worse than last week?
Wow.
I think they're pretty similar in quality, so I'm not going to argue if you want to go below.
I just
think for me, it edges it out slightly higher.
That's why I associated them both as sort of being oddly topical for, like a Veterans Day holiday and so on. It's just
not good with the way they did the topics. They could be better.
Yeah.
I think this one's slightly better too. Part of last week's episode is I like the episode I wanted to see more than I did. So yeah. And again, I don't love this one either, but I think I might nudge it just above. I don't know. I think there's more about this episode that I didn't like, but there's more about this episode that I did like too.
I guess I think the first one was maybe too insular to give you a lot of the material to work with, to say like and dislike. It's just
I think I'd go above.
So this one shot more shots, I guess is what I was going to say.
Yeah. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
I don't know. I think the last episode was cleaner for that same reason, which obviously works both for and against it. I don't know. There were too many off character things and too many things that were too conveniently bothering me. I don't know. I think I prefer last week's episode, but so now it's Jimmy's.
I said this was a little bit above.
Okay. All right. Well,
so right above that is the Ensigns of Command.
I think it's a good spot for it.
Go below that one.
These two should be linked together forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, we may split hairs at some point, but for now, let's keep them down low.
I think, we talk about to peel back that curtain again, we've been doing 2 episodes at a time, which has been kind of fun. And I think in our brains, we link them together. And as we watch each one, it's like, as we watch that second episode, it's always like, oh, this is a lot better, a lot worse or whatever. But I think in real time, you would do that too, though. I think you would be like, oh, this is a lot better than last week or whatever. You would, I think people do that in real time too. So it makes sense.
I think part of what's hurting these episodes for me too is we're almost to yesterday's Enterprise. The season ends with the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's these amazing episodes that we're around the cusp on, and so it frustrates me when the episodes are lackluster.
We're just killing time, yeah.
Yeah, where it's like I know we're almost there. We're almost like the best of where Next Gen really soars.
Yeah. Almost to the best of both worlds.
I mean, next week, Deja Q. Much to Picard's displeasure, Q reappears on the Enterprise, claiming to have been ejected from the Q continuum and therefore lost his powers. So we get a powerless Q.
Oh my God, I thought that already happened somehow. That's weird.
We also get the return of Guinan, Whoopi Goldberg.
Okay.
And we get to meet Corbin Burnson as Q2.
Wow.
Oh boy.
Huh.
I have a creeping sense of deja vu.
You like Corbin Burnson?
I do like Corbin Burnson.
Okay, so withhold your judgment, but he's playing a Q.
Okay.
I vaguely remember him being good. And well, I should probably save this.
Yeah, I think it was good too. So I'm looking forward to Deja Q. I remember Deja Q being a good episode. I know I've seen it before. Until then, live long.
Avoid, you know what? Interdimensional shifting, it's bad for you. Avoid it and prosper.
By comparison, by direct comparison to how you prospered last week.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?